Well, welcome to another session of the Victoria Leadership Collective. Hi, Alice, and hi, Rishi.
Hello.
Wonderful to be here. Hello.
Fantastic, fantastic. You two have a link in that Rishi, Alice was your instructor and supervisor at Royal Roads for your master's degree in leadership. I reviewed Alice's a LinkedIn profile. I don't have enough time to review all of the amazing things you've done, but we're very honored to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, totally. And for those folks, I've never met Alice, so this is my first time. For those folks that would likely have the same question as Alice if they're watching for the first time, would say, "What the hell is going on here? What are you doing? What is the Victoria Leadership Collective?" So let me just do a brief summary of how we got here. As it turns out, I have been what I'm going to call a serial entrepreneur most of my life, if not all my life, in that I have therefore started, operated, closed numerous companies and been involved in numerous community organizations throughout my lifetime. So I've accumulated quite a series of activities in business and community and politics for that matter. And earlier this year, I turned the ripe old age of 65. I know you all think that I'm only 49, but that's not true. And I thought, what's going to be my legacy here? What would I do? What should I do about that? Maybe write a book, maybe a big blog. And what I thought, no, you've been very much involved with video and video communication for about 10 years. Why don't you talk about your um, leadership moments or business moments in your life that you, at least that I think are exemplars of leadership. And so I started to do that. I put together some videos about 10, 15 minutes of reflecting on an experience in my lifetime. I'm now at the point where I'm creating ebooks from those videos. Along the way to the races, when I was reflecting on these things, I met with Rishi for coffee, didn't we? And that was about 3 months ago. And I then understood that you were involved in this leadership program at Royal Roads. And we exchanged ideas and thought, wouldn't this be cool to share some of these thoughts with our community? We're not doing that arrogantly. We're not doing that from any kind of point of superiority or superior experiences. Genuine discussions about what leadership is. I've helped Rishi numerous times during his political campaigns and just fascinated by his life experience. So we decided let's do a monthly review of that and talk to people about it. We're not monetizing this, and we enjoy it. We enjoy reviewing our experiences and how they relate to leadership and our definitions of what leadership is. And we decided to call that the Victoria Leadership Collective, and VLC for short, and I've had now maybe 3 or 4 meetings online. And we talk about definitions of leadership. We talk about people's experience with leadership. We disagree about all of those things. And Alice, we are very honored to be able to have you on our show relatively early in its existence. And so that's what we're doing here. I welcome any questions. None? Okay, that's great. So why don't I start off with really some sort of baseline, that you and Rishi and I are not in. We have different interpretations of the definition of leadership. What is leadership? To me, it's a series of micro leadership moments, micro moments that we have daily that are not big, profound community moments or business moments. They're decisions about moving one's life through the day. That sort of collection of those moments starts to form a confidence that when presented with a larger leadership question, enables one to make that decision rather confidently. Uh, Rishi, from your end, and if I'll just surmise that you're coming from a place of risk, taking risk, putting oneself out there, and so different interpretations. So I can't wait to hear Alice's interpretation of what a definition of leadership might be.
Well, I'm going to start with the question of definition. Definition is such a tight, controlled, there are a lot of expectations that come when you do a definition. And I'm not at all sure that we should really put any weight in leadership definitions. I think, John, you just did a beautiful descriptor of some of your ideas about how leadership works, and paraphrased some of Rishi's work there too. But I avoid definitions when I'm talking about leadership because it's so contextual. And I think there may be definitions that are great for specific circumstances, but misleading for others. So I guess the one sort of principle that I adhere to behind all that is that if you don't need change, you don't need leadership.
Mm.
If you just need things to be continuing on, grease the wheels, keep going as things are, although that's increasingly rare these days, then you need good management, but not necessarily leadership.
That's fascinating. I could just continue on in a conversation, but Rish, please, your responses.
I read something today, like so daily I'll just Google leadership skills and see what comes up. And there was an article that showed up today talking about leadership and confidence, which we've talked about much on this show. And you need that confidence to have leadership, and that's what makes a good leader. And then someone contradicted that and said, well, having the real true leadership skill is having the ability to get into the uncomfortable space and be resilient and change and malleable. And so, as Alice was saying, it's we struggled with the definition when we first asked that question. We said, "Here's my definition. Here's my definition." And then the next show, we kind of joked about it. Like there is no definition of leadership. How
Yeah.
do you find one? Each individual is different, but we are coming up with these different skills and competencies that we were seeing in certain people that have that leadership maybe that we want to aspire to be. And I keep for me, it's that risk. You have to be able to take that risk, have that confidence, and then the uncomfortability, getting in that uncomfortable space and being able to challenge yourself. That's what I think the true leadership is. That's part of it as well. But the definition, we I think
We've
we try to do
battled.
that in class in our class. It's the definition. We're like, you can't. We try to define it. You can't. It's very very difficult to do, and it's very personal.
I love Alice's answer. Context. It depends on the context. Um, you could be an extraordinary leader at an elementary school gym when there's some conflict going on between parents and a teacher while there's a game going on. And there could be important leadership happening in that moment that's that will never be likely equated to the kind of political leadership or societal leadership that we often equate that definition to. And so I just admire. So what you and I, Rish, and I'll be asking Alice's question is, where does that come from? Where does that seed start? That one person is able to uh, impact, process change, initiate change to change a scenario or situation, and another person doesn't. Can't wait to hear. You and I have gone back in this, haven't we? And with speakers. So I'd love to hear Alice's thoughts around where does this start?
Hmm, where does it start? I think part of where it starts is the nature of the environment that one's in. So, you know, um, the gym example is interesting because the person who's resolving the conflict is probably also very good at linear sequential kind of leadership around the rules of the game and the strategy of the game, and then is able to switch over to a different form of leadership that's much more nuanced and probably takes into play body language and knowledge of players and knowledge of parents and their influence and their power. And that kind of versatility uh, is probably a lifelong development, I would guess. That person has probably been in a lot of social situations, whether they're coming from a big family or a connected neighborhood or, where they've been exposed to different perspectives, different kinds of issues, and they've watched and they've learned and they've adapted and developed those skills. Uh, I think Rish made a point earlier about we're all different people. There's psychology involved with this, and that maybe if it had been a different set of parents causing the problems, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
It's there are a lot of individual views of what leadership should look like and whether one connects and is empathetic and trusting. So,
What's
yeah.
amazing is when you can see it. So I was coaching U11, under 11, a girls soccer team, my daughter's soccer team. And there's this one young girl on the team, and she's a great soccer player, but she's very timid, and I could see her change when I was offering just a little bit of positivity towards her and saying, "Why don't you go lead the group, or can you take this on?" Because it's kind of there, but it's in there for some reason. But if you can channel that and pull it out with additional skills and competencies and learning, and you can see how fantastic she's become on the soccer field. And she'll come to games, and the energy is different. And she'll go to her teammate and say, you should do that, or she'll tell my daughter something else. And just like that, it can be born with a little bit of positivity and some skills. And I could see there was something already there. And again, is it a DNA thing? It must have been something from the parents or what? Like I think that's a whole other PhD study where it actually comes
Oh,
from.
we'll solve it on this show.
Oh yeah, we'll do that. Who needs a dissertation? We'll just figure it out.
I think
Well,
that ongoing feeding and nurturing and support is really important. Otherwise, you said early, Rish, that confidence is important. That confidence can't, well, I shouldn't say can't, it's unlikely to develop in isolation.
Yeah,
Um,
I do. I
I
do agree.
remember once when I had an assistant deputy minister who had been exposed to Rosabeth Moss Cantor's work, and he went out to the field offices in his organization and said, who are the leaders? And I think in headquarters, people wouldn't have known how to answer the question, but um, people were comfortable understanding that leaders can be anywhere. And for some reason, a whole lot of people mentioned me. So he came back and told me about that. And it was one of those moments like talking to the kid on the soccer field. It was like, okay, I know I do well with this, that, and the other, but I had not framed that as leadership. But I respected his work a lot, and that was a key element in my becoming interested in leadership, not only in practice, but from an academic perspective as well.
I am, yes, Rish. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, now look at the significance of the amount of people you've been able to help and nurture
Oh,
just
Mm,
because of that. We're creating that. What you've done for me was amazing. But
mm,
again, it's having someone just that individual to touch base with and know you're doing okay. I walked into a master's program very challenged in that imposter syndrome that comes up in probably in every class, or there'll be one student that says it, and I really felt it. And then you finally, with nurturing and support, you find your groove. I'm like, hold on a second, I do belong here, but you have to have that. I've had this conversation with Alice before, and I had a godfather who took me aside and was very kind and taught me and built that confidence in me. Plus, background of strength from just back in India and hearing the stories, but it all goes back to those
Yeah.
stories when you're a kid and the impact it makes.
Well, in so many, well, literally in every instance of my life that I can recall, which as I get older is weakening. But it's been and how I approach activities is one from that saying the cup is half full, and how two people can see a same situation and interpret it differently. And that then starts from, the daily decisions to the much larger business, community, organizational decisions that really nothing that is ever presented to us is negative.
Mm.
That we can always switch and functionally interpret and move ahead in a positive way. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe at some point, constantly sort of being beaten down and having to get up, and you get up and you sort of intuitively learn that process. I find it that attitude is sorely lacking in our community, sorely lacking, that we so easily fall to the cup is half empty. And hence this program, these shows hopefully will present people a bit of optimism. Okay, maybe I can get through this if I see it in a different way, in a way that whatever I'm learning, these are lessons that collectively are going to help me come out of this, right? And so now we got layers and layers of stuff, don't we? We've got process of leadership, um, we've got origination of leadership, we have experiences of leadership. So really, really appreciate this from the two of you. If I could ask Alice a question, sort of now taking all of that and moving it to some more broader challenges in our society that we're facing. But some context for me, from me. I'm a grandfather. I have four children who are no longer children. They're closer to Rishi's age than they are children. Rishi could be my son for gosh sake. Um, and I have four grandchildren. So, this sort of continuum of youth and their and what they think and how they think is of a major curiosity to me, because I'd always thought that generational differences were basically more from experience and like based on experiences, but ultimately they were the same experiences. That is not happening, in my opinion, to youth now. And therefore, I'm curious around, do younger people and younger demographics see leadership differently? I happen to think that a key missing piece in their interpretation of leadership, aside from the way they want to policy, aside from that, is this reluctance to listen and to hear what somebody else is saying. And I know there was a time when I didn't do that, but I think that was more because I was a teenager. But I don't see that changing for a lot of younger people. That in fact, John, your way of seeing the world is wrong. Mine is right. And sort of collectively in that bubble, we're going to lead and we're going to implement our policies. I don't want to hear what you have to say, and that's problematic for on so many levels. Alice, I'd love to hear your thoughts about what I'm saying.
Well, I'll start by saying that generational psychology and behavior is not my area of expertise. So um, uh, I'll be quick. I think even Reach with his family is in a better position right now to talk about that. Uh, but you're raising a lot of things. I think one of the things you're raising is that in our society, in Western society, particularly North American Western society, we don't respect our elders the way a lot of the world does. And I think that's a fairly recent phenomenon, and I'm curious about how that really got started.
Evolved? Yeah.
The wisdom of someone who has lived for many decades is not really considered very important, especially in a world that's changing rapidly. Um, I think also, I sometimes work with international students at Royal Roads and often with Canadians, and I'm seeing differences there. I see um, young people from other countries, and this could be a whole podcast too, being generally more curious, more open, more interested, more willing to think about other perspectives, more able to get into uncomfortable conversations sometimes than people who have only lived in this country. So I think we've got to be careful about generalizations. I think also the fact that we've reinforced skills that are typically young people skills. Um, I mean, back quite a while ago when I lived in Alberta, those were often manual skills and, blue collar skills. And someone would be out there at age 18, having dropped out of school, making 4 times as much as their father did, doing hard physical labor.
Mm.
And now, if you've got good tech savvy skills and you're getting into AI and things like that, there's so much interest and prestige and applicability and debate and um, in those areas that I can see why those people who are in the midst of this rapid change are thinking, yeah, I've got the answer. Older people are out of touch. But there's a whole other suite of answers that come from people who study generations. What
Is
do you
there
think, Rishi?
is there a paradigm shift to thinking differently about our elders? Yes. Is it something that I'm teaching my daughters, being Indo-Canadian, visible minority girls? Yes. Have your confidence and know your own strengths, but here's that fine line. Respect your elders and listen to them, but they need to understand how much they can learn from you as well. And there was John made a comment which kind of hit on unconscious biases. They don't listen. Well, it's our job to be able to ensure we're communicating properly so they hear. Right? We're the ones who need to be. If elders, maybe there was a pathway for elders that they spoke differently to their youth that made them listen. There was a different respect. Were they treating youth differently? Are we treating youth so they're not listening to us? I know I have to continuously think about how I'm communicating with my daughters so they hear me and so they listen to me. And there'll be different arguments in the house with, not arguments, conversations with my wife, different dialogue and saying, well, they're not doing this or not doing that. I said, well, maybe we should be able to communicate it differently. So we're having that conversation. And I have to. It's not the same old fear relationship that you have with your children nowadays. It's respect. And that's, I'll do everything I can. So they will have that open and honest conversation with me. And then there comes that respectful dialogue. So is it a full paradigm shift? Maybe not. But I think we should welcome that here we have a group of youth that are coming up with this different, again, confidence, these different perspectives and knowledge that some of us we can't even touch. Like, I don't know, their technological advances and innovations that the youth are learning right now. It's wild, and we should take the opportunity to learn from them.
I think for me the quagmire of this that the challenge I've presented you is exemplified best within the entire conversation society's having around the environment,
Mm.
and that so it's not it could be that we react differently within a more personal scenario. So Reach, with all due respect, I'm sort of taking it to a policy level. And in reading Alice's background, I saw a real emphasis on communication, that when there's problems, when there are challenges, more communication, more understanding. That all works if everyone is listening. And it's not entirely dependent on one's presentation of a point of view that's then received honorably. That one has to be learned into saying that that's interesting. that point that I disagree with is coming from somewhere, and somehow I gotta respect that. And I don't I think we're losing that rapidly, and it's being exemplified in some of these. Certainly in the States, it's gone all askewer. It's gone just that equation is lost. I do not know what's going to happen to them down there. And so really incumbent upon all of us to maintain that kind of civility up here. And yeah, I say that with full confidence.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
only smiling because there's this excellent thesis you should read, written by Rishi Sharma. It's on it,
Oh,
utilizing
yeah.
uncomfortable conversations to build
Right
relationships.
on.
And the supervisor is Alice.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think I'll do that.
Yeah.
Um,
But
but
what you're saying is
so
100% correct, Sean.
it's just very concerning that, and almost like there's a lack of energy, lack of time. So when we bring this back to the leadership bubble, and when and how does leadership happen? Um, there's sort of a breakdown here because one would have assumed that someone would learn through their experiences how to impact change or make change. But there seems to be a part of that missing in that, no, we're not going to listen to these people. This is the change we're going to implement because we're right. You know? And so is there a paradigm shift? I think there is, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Well, for a long time, there's been a model of leadership often referred to as charismatic leadership. And I think we're seeing a rather bizarre example of that south of the border.
Yes.
But one of the characteristics of that style of leadership, arguably, is people giving up their own agency. It's there is the leader, oh, aren't they great? Aren't they charming? Aren't they eloquent? Well, obviously we're mixing up people in this story here,
That's
but
okay. Yeah.
the idea that someone is strong and influential and right, and we just have to follow that person. And that strips, in my view, the power of a democracy, the power of a community, because people are not only not motivated to speak up and try to make change, but they're possibly also um, afraid to in extreme circumstances. And I think much of the populace has been raised with that kind of leadership model. Role modeling is hugely important. And how many, formal leaders, now by formal, I'm looking, at when you turn on the TV, for example, how many of those are exhibiting curiosity? Maybe even if they do in their daily lives, that's not what you see portrayed. You see them being confident and eloquent and firm and decisive. And so that's what you're supposed to grow up to be. I mean, what schools teach well about curiosity and openness and pluralism, it just doesn't have profile right now. So that's part of what we try to do in the leadership program is to encourage curiosity.
Hmm.
And it's so much more interesting than spending time relaying a point of view.
Which at Royal Roads they do exceptionally well. I've never been in such a safe environment to be able to talk about anything. And coming from the public service or coming from even the construction sector where it's just not that welcome, and to be in this classroom. But this goes into something that we've talked about on every single show is kind of the need for the skills and competencies in leadership. And one of the reasons why we had this show was to have these conversations so people can pick up. But just I think John, you said it last show, like you couldn't believe the amount that of need there is because we were talking to someone else on skills and competencies in leadership, and I was so lucky to be able to have the privilege and opportunity to go in the classroom, but so much more is needed, I think, with our leaders.
Well, absolutely. So we'll certainly continue this. Alice, what struck me here that I've not connected the dots on is your comment about giving up agency or losing agency, personal agency, and that is required almost almost a prerequisite to then fall into a lack of leadership, a personal leadership, and how our political scenarios and actually economic and community scenarios are forcing people into those choices, and how then Rishi that relates to conversations we've had around confidence, and how it's an integral variable for strong leadership is to have confidence in oneself and one's decisions and one family. And so how much therefore of any kind of leadership is self-confidence, and then yet again, where is that seed coming from?
Well, I'll make a couple of comments here. I do believe that confidence is important, but at the same time, I think it's overrated. I think it's again contextual. The assistant deputy minister that I mentioned, one of the things that I personally respected about his leadership was his struggling with the ethics of decisions. And he would do that publicly. And, people would start to engage about, oh, I hadn't thought about the downsides of this, or I hadn't thought about the benefits of that. And I found it a really, I mean, in part with him, it was coming from a religious background, but regardless of that, it was a demonstration of really caring about what the right results, what the right outcomes might be. Now, he wasn't always waffling, but you would see that come up periodically with some sort of an important decision. And when, we're talking about confidence in relation to personal mastery and personal development and skills, I have to put in a word for Otto Sharma because he's one of my favorite writers and speakers and thinkers around this. And he outlines, I won't go into it in any detail, but he outlines paths of growth that people can go through in order to develop skills that I believe are critical for leadership. And it's not as simple as labels or definitions like you might have for confidence or you might have for communication. So, back if you'd asked me 30 years ago whether knowledge of self was important for leadership, I probably would have wrestled with an answer. And now, every year that goes by, every issue that comes up for the public, every world crisis, I'm thinking it's absolutely critical. And that's something we should be working on a lot more.
I So one of the nuances of digital conversations, of course, these days, is that the patient level of our listener is not very large. So as much as we could likely go on for quite some time, we'll probably wrap things up. So Alice, I'm going to put you on the spot, and would love to hear what some of those leadership characteristics are, or that one we could impart upon our for our audience, maybe from this gentleman's writings, two or three characteristics that we should all think about embracing. For example, while you're thinking, I happen to believe, and have exhibited this throughout my life, that a certain amount of physical personal wellness is necessary to be able to even start to lead people or lead yourself. Part of that physical wellness is exercise. And people go, "Oh, come on, John, that's something I hear all the time." Well, I believe it's an essential element to then moving forward. If you're not physically well, and I mean self-induced physically well, Rishi, not inevitable aged pain, etc. But if you take care of yourself, you're going to be a better person. And if 1,000 people do that, we have a better community that then's able to listen to each other better, blah, 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 Anyway, there was my sort of quick exemplar, Alice.
Okay. And you did give me a few minutes to think, which is good, although I heard what you said and I agree with it. Uh, I I've actually come up with a list of maybe five things.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah.
Self-awareness, which is
Hmm.
part of what you were talking about, and wellness needs to come in there. Contextual awareness, and that can be everything from how complex is the issue we're dealing with through to who's in the room and maybe a subset of that is body language. So much of what's going on is nonverbal. I think systems thinking is critical because if you don't think about the connections and what might happen and what might the future look like and what goes beyond the political cycle, then you're not going to have the skills you need. And I simply have to add a last one, uncomfortable conversations.
Excellent.
I mean, the curiosity required to step into the unknown and be vulnerable and be open to having your views changed and building those relationships and building trust is really important as well.
Yeah. Needed now more than ever.
Yes.
Yes.
Alice, Rishi, can't thank you enough. I hope this experience for you, Alice, lends itself to coming back on the show in the future, because we're going to continue to have these essential community building, family building conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.